Started, and later on I'll try to introduce you a rather late article by Heidegger entitled The Age of World Picture. One of the most important and influential articles, actually. That book, Being and Time itself, was quite interesting and influential, and still exerts its influence in contemporary thinking. And we have left the discussion just as a reminder, you know. We were talking about Dasein's modes of being. In the world, alongside with. We have stated existence. Dasein exists, Heidegger says, okay? And only Dasein exists. Okay? And this matter was related with the question or problem of having a world. Okay? So we have discussed this, so no need once again to bring it into our attention. Bağırayım. Sesim biraz şey de gevrek ve çatlak ya, bağırayım. And then we were talking about Dasein's facticity. This actually, I said, is something related with the questions of birth and death. And here there's a very beautiful quotation. I'm going to read it to you. But it's one of the most interesting phenomenon, actually. Okay, and when you really think about it, you'll find it quite surprising. Okay? Simply because it's related with the fact that, actually, it's related with the very, very possibility of facticity itself. The fact itself is nothing else than that Dasein is here. Okay. And nothing else, actually. There's a very beautiful quotation, as I said, and I'm going to read it to you, share it with you. So, let me start from this. First, our author, as far as I remember, Jones writes, and then takes a quotation from Heidegger. Okay, let me read that to you both together. Jones writes that Dasein's existence is just a brute fact. Brute fact. Actually, Dasein's existence is that very meaning of what fact is. Okay, you'll see, perhaps. I hope. Okay, that is incapable of any logical, rational, scientific, or teleological explanation. Okay, you'll see why. Because we lack any such explanation, we feel ourselves simply to have been thrown into the world, ignorant of whence we have come or whither we will go. Given our mode of entry into it and our mode of exit from it, given our feelings that are simply there in the world is not the sort of place in which we can feel at home. We are, as it were, orphans and homeless. Okay? Now, the quotation, Heidegger writes, Dasein understands its ownmost being in the sense of a certain factual being present at hand. Okay. This phenomenon is quite interesting, actually. For instance, when you say something like this, you remember there was a slogan, "This is my body." In that sense, that body turns out to be yours. Okay. This is somehow related with this, you know. Dasein understands its ownmost being in the sense of a certain factual present at hand. And yet, the factuality of the fact of one's own Dasein is at bottom quite different ontologically from the factual occurrence of some kind of mineral, for example. Whenever Dasein is, it is a fact. Okay? And the factuality of such a fact is what we shall call Dasein's facticity. This is a definite way of being, and it has a complicated structure which cannot even be grasped as a problem until Dasein's basic existential states have been worked out. The pure that it is shows itself, but the whence and the whither remains in darkness. The characteristic of Dasein's being, this that is, is veiled in its whence and whither, yet disclosed in itself all the more unavailedly. We call it the thrownness of this entity into its there. This is a strange idea. You know, Dasein meant already that strange word Dasein, which simply meant existence, And we are talking about this, there. If you like, wherever I am, it's there. It's that place. And wherever I am cannot be detached from me, and in what sense it has been connected with me cannot be understood. That's the problem. There was a movie, Being There. It is somehow related with Heideggerian thinking as well, But that there is interesting, coupled with this being, This is the facticity of Dasein. And whenever Dasein is, there is a fact. Let me continue again, a few sentences. That it is of facticity never becomes something that we can come across by beholding it. Dasein itself, as in each case, my Dasein and this Dasein, must be. Don't you feel some strange tone in the language here? This Dasein and my Dasein must be. There is no possibility of detaching this must be from the facticity of this Dasein. And in the same way, the truth, as Dasein's disclosedness, must be. This belongs to Dasein's essential thrownness into the world. Has Dasein, as itself, ever decided freely whether it wants to come into Dasein or not? No longer he says wants to come into the world. He says whether Dasein wants to come into Dasein or not. Or will it ever be able to make such a decision? In itself, it's quite incomprehensible why entities are to be uncovered, why truth and Dasein must be. As something thrown, Dasein has been thrown into existence. It exists as an entity which has to be as it is and as it can be. This is what he was talking about when he talks about the facticity of Dasein, its birth and its death. Dasein is something limited, but its being here is something which cannot be detached. The very factual, if you like, tangible, it's being here. That's the point. Actually, this is a very interesting problem, simply because whatever kind of discourse one may adapt, whether it could be theological discourse, scientific discourse, fictional discourse, or whatever, artistic, stylistic discourse, doesn't make difference. In this age or in that age, either does not make any difference. Or the contents of the discourse do not make any difference either. In each and every case, that which determines actually and sets the possibility of all is Dasein's being there. That's this. Actually, this problem I had encountered when I was thinking about the possible historization of human knowledge, about which we are going to talk at the second hour. And there, some strange thing began to strike me. Just to give you a few hints about the problem. You know, we are talking about the transformation of knowledge in the form of, say, Greek episteme, later on medieval doctrina or scientia, and later on modern science, etc. And we come to we become aware that actually what's at stake here in these three different historical cases, periods, is not the continuation or evolution of one into the other. Okay? Some form of knowledge develops at a certain period of time and disappear and being replaced by another form of knowledge. Okay? So when we are talking about then episteme, scientia, and science, we are still referring to knowledge, but we are not referring to the same thing, whatever it is. Okay? But the strange point is that in each and every case, we were talking about there being a type of knowledge. Okay? So how come? Okay? Even they change in their content, in their style, in their organizations, in their setting up their own words, okay? They're radically different from each other. But how come it turns out to be possible to identify them, despite all these differences, as different forms of knowledge? Okay. And the answer could be, under the light of the discussion which Heidegger develops here, is that in each and every case, Dasein, if you like, was there. Okay. And each and every case, what was at stake when we say episteme, scientia, and science, okay, somehow very closely connected with Dasein. One single element, one common element for all these three forms of different organizations of knowledge was this and nothing else. Okay. Not that they are written, not that they have been formulated in this or that manner, not that their contents were similar, etc. Not that the world in which they were operating the same. No, they were radically different from each other. But Dasein was in each and every case there. Okay. That could be a point, I think, okay, to be able to helping us to be able to resolve that problem of the continuing identity of something over and over different historical periods. Okay, it cannot be refused. It's that important in that sense. Okay, and sets actually all the possibility of thinking historically, so to speak. Fine. So that was about the facticity of Dasein, and we were talking about Angst, you know, in connection with this. And Angst comes to the picture as an answer, Heidegger's answer, to the question of how come Dasein yet discloses, uncovers this facticity. You know, a few moments ago in the quotations, we have seen that this facticity of Dasein cannot be approached in none of the ways known to us in the name of knowledge. Okay? Nor science, nor even theology can help us to be able to approach this facticity of Dasein. But Dasein understands its own facticity, therefore, by other means. Okay? First of all, again, kind of similarity and difference between Heideggerian and Husserlian thinking. Just like modalities of intentionality, you know, noetics, as you may remember. Okay, Heidegger here would introduce his conceptualization of moodiness. Okay, in other words, Dasein connects with the world in or through certain moods. Okay. So understanding being only one of possible moods of Dasein when connecting with the world. Okay, and not necessarily having the monopoly of illuminating the world. More than that, Angst actually in this connection, in Dasein's becoming aware of its own facticity, Angst comes to the foreground. Angst is a strange feeling, having nothing to do with the psychological concept, or as they use the concept in psychology, anxiety, actually, and differs from fear. You know, for Heidegger, fear is that feeling we feel, we have, in the face of which what is we know, okay? Which we know. So fear can be connected with a certain knowable, at least, cause. Okay, when we are talking about fear, you can point out the cause of the fear, that feeling we experience. Okay. However, this is not the case with our anxiety, angst. Okay, angst actually a strange feeling. I'm sure all of you had experienced it. Okay, it is that feeling in the humdrum of the, in the running of the business of the world. Okay, suddenly everything stops. You stop, and suddenly at one moment, in Heidegger's language, being shines itself upon you. Okay, it's that moment. It is that moment. What you feel at that moment is angst. Okay, you don't know what it is. You do not have any understanding or explanation for the phenomenon, but it suddenly strikes you. Suddenly shows everything meaningless, for instance. Okay, you know, in our busybody dealings with the world, in our Heideggerian language, we come to feel ourselves as if we are doing something very important at the moment. Okay, the world is very important, we are very important in it, and what we are doing in it is quite very important and indispensable. But it is in this rush, exactly in this rush of the world, okay, everything stops and being shows itself to you. We don't understand that it's being, according to Heidegger, but we feel a kind of uneasiness in the face of this. Okay. Let me read the quotation. How far is anxiety or angst, let me say angst, okay, anxiety is something else. How far is angst a state of mind which is distinctive, okay? That in the face of which we has angst is being in the world as such, okay? What is the difference phenomenally between that in the face of which angst is anxious and that in the face of which fear is afraid? Strange language, yeah? Angst itself getting anxious, not Dasein, not we, but angst itself, and fear itself getting feared. Okay. Then in the face of which one has angst is not an entity within the world. Thus it's essentially incapable of having an involvement. So, because it was the being itself which shows its face to us in a very rather short moment. Okay. This threatening does not have the character of a definite detrimentality which reaches what is threatened and which reaches it with definite regard to a special factical potentiality for being. That in the face of which one is anxious is completely indefinite. Not only does this indefiniteness leaves factically undecided which entity within the world is threatening us, okay, but also it also tells us that entities within the world are not relevant at all. Nothing which is ready to hand or present at hand within the world functions as that in the face of which anxiety is anxious. Okay. That in the face of which one has anxiety is characterized by the fact that what threatens is nowhere. Anxiety does not know what that in the face of which it's anxious. Nowhere, however, does not signify nothing. Okay. That which threatens cannot bring itself close from a definite direction within what is close by. It's already there and yet nowhere. It is so close that it's oppressive and stifles one's breath and yet it's nowhere. Being anxious discloses primordially and directly, far beyond understanding, okay? The world as the world, okay? It is not the case, say, that the world first gets thought of by deliberating about it just by itself, okay, without regard for the entities within the world, and that in the face of this world, anxiety then arises. What is rather the case is that the world as world is disclosed first and foremost by anxiety as a mode of state of mind. This does not signify, however, that in anxiety the worldhood of the world gets conceptualized. So the world, being itself, shines, shows itself, and creating a kind of uncertain, indefinite mood in our existence. Okay. This would turn out to be quite important for Heidegger, simply because, according to Heidegger, it is being's mode of reminding us its own being there. Okay. You know, his whole argument based upon, since the inception of the Western philosophy, what he calls Western philosophy, from the time of Socrates himself up until to Descartes, actually is the history of forgetfulness of being, actually. Human beings delving into the things of this world, okay, busying themselves into the affairs of this world and forgetting the question of being. Okay. In other words, that angst is that moment being reminds us its own being there. Okay. And we suddenly stop, everything stops, and we feel we enter or fall into this moody kind of existence, experiencing angst. Okay. However, as you can see, this indefinite feeling has a very positive and important function for Heidegger, simply because it brings us back the very question we have forgotten up until now. Okay, fine. That was about the facticity or thrownness of Dasein. Okay, and finally, it's being fallenness. Actually, as you can see, you can find out certain parallelisms between this and Christian doctrine as well. Okay. Facticity, the third one, fallenness. What is meant by fallenness is the fallenness of Dasein from its authentic being into its inauthenticity. Okay. Now, what's meant by authentic being? Actually, these terms by now had already been archaic, you know, and human nature. So all the discussions of alienation bases themselves upon this presupposition of an existence of some kind, whatever kind, nobody knows, human nature, you know. We have a similar talk here, okay. We are talking about Dasein, and suddenly we've been introduced with the question of the authentic being of Dasein, what this authentic being is, okay. Strange thing. However, if you follow the quotations, you'll find out that for Heidegger, Dasein was a very specific kind of being. First of all, it was the only condition actually of being there, that something is. Okay, this meaning of is var ya da o is, o başa bela is. Of course, this has some connection with human existence. Okay, of course, it's a part of language. It is the language. If you like, the summary of the language. Okay. So, however, in connection with this is, anything becomes. Okay, that's the problem. In other words, if we are talking about, you know, only in the case of Dasein we have talked about ontic existence. And when we were talking about this ontic existence, thrownness, you know, facticity of Dasein, ontic existence, we have several times emphasized that it's not something which can readily be understood. Neither theology nor science nor any whatever you like, okay, does not help us to understand this. And this, even the possibility of talking about this, had been based upon the vague, indefinite feeling of angst. Angst does not understand, he says, let me remind the quotation, okay? Angst does not understand, but something shines, that's all, okay? Therefore, it's immediate, not a relationship of representation at all, as usually the form of our knowledge is, okay? So it's not related with knowledge, it's not related with understanding, but you immediately experience that facticity of your own Dasein, so to speak, okay? That's all. However, here, what I was saying, okay? In this fallenness, this is something quite else, actually, again triggered by that angst, okay? Simply because angst turns out to be a disturbing feeling, showing us that the world is an uncanny place. It's not our home, okay? And there is no possible reason to be given why you are there, constituting the very ground of this there-ness, being there. That's why he calls this phenomenon as Dasein, as we have several times pointed out, okay? It is this disturbing feeling, Dasein at the same time remembers the question of being, but at the moment of this remembrance, Dasein prefers to flee from it, okay? And the question of the authentic existence of Dasein is exactly related with this decision of either staying and staring at the eye of being or preferring to forget it, okay? Now, modern times, according to Heidegger, has such an organization that it encourages, okay? It encourages us to turn our backs to the question of being, okay? And rather, it encourages us to face the beings, okay? But in doing so, okay, what we do is return back from the shining of being, okay, and delve into the day self. The term day self is quite a simple term used by Heidegger just to point out the day. You know, we use that term, onlar, yaparlar. Most of the time without, in Turkish especially, without specifically using that personal pronoun, third personal pronoun, plural, they, okay, whatever they are, whoever they are, nobody knows this day, but always turns out to be the point of reference, okay? It is this day, Dasein flees from being and delves into, and there prefers to forget being as well as itself, okay? So actually practically what takes place here is a kind of, how can we put it, conformism. Dasein prefers to do, in other words, what the others are already doing, okay? Dasein prefers to not to take any risks, okay? Not to depart from what the others are doing, and prefers to forget about all these things in the mediocre averageness of the day, okay? Assuming a conforming attitude, okay? This turning away from being is exactly what constitutes for Heidegger ground for this inauthentic existence of Dasein. As we have seen, that there is something rather than nothing is only due to the facticity of Dasein, okay? In other words, Dasein's existence, which is spread all over the world due to Dasein's concernful dealings with the world, okay, opening up a world, and the world being, showing itself into this world, okay, bringing entities and other things, bringing being into, all the realization of all of this being dependent upon Dasein's holding a disclosed place, an open place, often borrowed. Okay. It at the same time, you know, means opening, but in the other sense, revelation at the same time. Okay. Now here there is a difficulty. One may think, for instance, one may think that, is it possible to contain all that is within this disclosedness of Dasein? Okay. Now it appears that this is not possible, and this is what Heidegger aims at. Therefore, what's at stake is the opening up of a certain space of clearance, so to speak, okay, characterized by Lichtung, light, okay, the light being the concernful dealings of Dasein, where being, as well as beings, die Seiende, Sein and die Seiende, okay, show themselves, give themselves away, okay. But this does not mean that beyond the horizons, Heidegger would talk about the horizons, beyond the horizons of this disclosedness, being does not stop, okay? But it gives itself here in this clearing. This means that the interaction between being and Dasein turns out to be a very important phenomenon. All the possibility of this opening up of a space of clearance in which being shows itself and gives itself away. In other words, if all the Daseins had died, okay? In other words, if the human species disappears from the face of the earth, okay, we may rightfully ask the question, what may happen to being? Nothing, you know? But that thing comes to pass that being would not be able to find an openness, okay, to bring itself and to give itself away. That's why, for Heidegger, Dasein's being there turns out to be very crucial and destinedful. Okay, geschichtlich, rather than geschichtlich, historical. Okay, so being, Dasein's being there is not a simple phenomenon of an individual's life or death. What's at stake here is the possibility of being giving itself. Okay, so Dasein has a certain duty as well as responsibility in its relationship with being. Heidegger describes this relationship as when he attributes the role of the shepherd to Dasein and said that Dasein is the shepherd of being. Okay. It is responsible. Don't forget, at the very beginning of our argumentation, the very possibility of the concept of Dasein was based upon that shift from understanding, from knowing, as it was the case in Kant, in Husserl, in others, etc., to Sorge, to concernful dealings. Okay, Dasein is a worried creature. Okay, trying to take care of everything, projecting itself onto existence, therefore being ahead of itself, and therefore contributing something out of itself onto being as well. Okay, so therefore being quite responsible for what happens now or what will happen next. Okay. Well, we can see this position still, if you ask me, it is quite an anthropomorphic reading of the question of being. Okay. And I'll stop here talking about being and time. If you have any questions about it, we can, as far and as much as we can, of course. Any questions?